I'm here with Ethann Fox. He is the director of the Awake and Empowered Expo. It's going to be happening in Detroit, 2013, October. And he is also a spiritual leader and the director of Flower of Life Conscious Group. And we're here to ask him a couple questions. So, Ethann, what can you tell us about yourself as a spiritual leader first? How did you come about?
It was about a year and a half ago that I met this woman who can see energy fields very, very well, better than anybody I've ever met. And if you're familiar with Edgar Cayce, he writes about his ability to see auras. And she came to one of our events that we had going on, a Flower of Life, and before she left, she commented on how my energy field was unique and different than she'd seen before and bigger than she'd seen before. And so it got me to thinking that if that's true, then that would explain a lot of things in my life and that I really should explore that further. And just prior to that, I had somewhat of a spiritual awakening that completely changed my views and life direction. And it's sort of in a simple nutshell, that's what brought me down this path.
Okay. I actually hear a lot of those stories nowadays of people that were leading one life and all of a sudden they have a calling for another life. Is that kind of what your direction you're going with this?
Yeah, well, a lot of people are waking up these days, and so I'm no exception. But in my circles, I hear these sorts of stories all the time where people are suddenly coming into awareness of a part of themselves they never knew was there, and suddenly their former life makes no more sense, and their former relationships make no sense, and they feel an inclination to go in a whole new direction in their life. And really, it's a direction that is really more true to their nature. And so for me, it's not really, I didn't really wake up one day and decide I'm going to be a spiritual leader. It just sort of was something that happened, and things just kept happening, and I'm simply walking in a direction that is in front of me versus trying to do anything.
Excellent. So around that time, I understand that you created the Flower of Life Center for, Evolution? Yes. And tell me a little bit about that, because it has gained quite a following.
Mm-hmm. It really was. It's essentially we have a number of classes, and the classes have been going on for probably about 7 or 8 years. Some of them started out as a raw food organization, as well as in health and an astrology, numerology, which is really my background. About the fall of 2011, I decided to merge both groups into one and call it Flower of Life. And then soon after, we added other classes like Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga, and I've been doing my consciousness events as well. It's really the foundation of the organization is to provide people with tools and resources and a community to support their growth, and so that everyone can live a more fulfilling, happy life. And that's the underlying philosophy of everything that we do.
Excellent. And so that brings me to consciousness itself. How would you understand or describe consciousness in a simple way to someone who's never been exposed to this term?
Mm-hmm. Well, consciousness is hard to define because depending on the consciousness level of the person who's listening to this, they're going to understand my words differently. And that's the thing about consciousness is so let's take two people who read the Bible, for example, and let's say one has a very low consciousness and one has a very high consciousness. The one of a lower consciousness will read it and will see God as someone who punishes them for their sins, and so a vengeful God, where the person of a higher consciousness can read the same book, and yet they will see a loving God, and they'll see a hopeful world. So consciousness determines our vantage point of through which we experience life. It determines how we treat others. It determines how we live our life. Consciousness is the difference between a criminal and a saint, and so it's a hard thing to define. But what I can say is that if one of the things that is common with the growth in consciousness is a person with lower consciousness is primarily focused on themselves, their own needs, their own success, making money for themselves, taking care of their own inner circle. The higher a consciousness person becomes, the more they become concerned about other people and the world as a whole, and they become less concerned about themselves. And you get to a point where a person is very saintly, where almost all of their focus is on the well-being of others and the happiness of others and making the world better, and very little attention toward themselves. That's a measure of consciousness that you can actually see in the real world, and more people are heading in that direction. And so ultimately, we will end up with a world where people are not so worried about themselves and they're really more focused on others. I hear a lot these days, because we're still in the society where the old ways are still very much intact. A lot of people are very concerned about. This is something that I've experienced many times over the years. A lot of people, especially in Western society, so focused on their own success. They believe that if they don't do something to get ahead, that somebody else is going to take it away from them. So it's perfectly acceptable to take advantage of others because if you don't do that, then who's going to look out for you? That's a low consciousness person. When you raise in consciousness, what you realize is the more you serve others, the more others serve you, and the more the universe serves you. So there's never a fear of not enough or a fear of lack. So the idea that you have to struggle and take away from others in order to have a good life yourself is a false idea, and it's an egoic construct that is rapidly changing with growth in consciousness in the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's a lot of great examples of leaders of consciousness throughout time. The Martin Luther Kings, the Gandhis, Mother Teresa's, and examples such as those. But I too believe there's more to come. There's going to be more of them sprinkled about the planet. Now, I did some research before. When I say research, I looked up in a dictionary unconscious, because sometimes if you don't, I have problems with a definition. I look at the opposite of it. And unconscious means not perceived at the level of awareness or occurring below the level of consciousness. So like you were saying, some people simply aren't aware that they are cutthroat, aren't aware that they can work with someone and get the same results or better results instead of climbing a corporate ladder or stepping on someone else to get to those points. How would you describe the level of consciousness of the planet currently, part one, and in 10 years, part two?
Well, we're in a period of global revolution, and I say that not only as somebody who's involved in the consciousness movement itself, but also as an astrologer, numerologist. I study the cycles, and I can say that right now we're in the midst of a global revolution that really we're just the beginning of, and that's the most similar, although it's going to be much, much bigger, but it's the most similar to what was happening in the late 1770s, early 1800s, which is really when we had a revolution in the United States. So we are in the midst of that right now, and by the end of the 2020s, we're going to see a lot of dramatic changes in the world. So we are right now struggling. The Bible talks about, or a lot of the ancient texts talk about, a period of hell on earth or Armageddon or whatever. Armageddon is really sort of a description of where we are now. It's a struggling of two sides. It's the struggling of the old energy or the lower consciousness against the awakening that is happening in the world in consciousness. And so where we are right now is we have these two opposing sides. We have the vast majority of people are still very much asleep and unconscious, but as more and more people wake up, it is causing a ripple effect across the whole planet to where people as a whole are waking up. But we've got a long way to go. 10 years from now, I think we're going to have made dramatic changes and movement toward a much better world, not only in consciousness, but also we'll see the physical manifestations of that in technology and science and health and medicine. I'm already seeing the beginnings of that now. So we are right on the precipice of incredible things, but the vast majority of the public doesn't notice it yet. They are unaware of it because the media doesn't report about any of these things, but nonetheless, I see it happening. I think we'll be in pretty good shape 10 years from now.
Yeah, I agree. I have a quote here that I think this was actually said many years ago by Michael Ellner, but I think it sums up the lack of consciousness very beautifully. It says, doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, major media destroys information, and religion destroys spirituality. What would you have to say about that?
The thing, any kind of structured system has a tendency to want to control things. You know, all structured systems are means for people to control certain aspects of society or belief. You know, because it's because all structures that we've known so far, well, not all, but a good majority of the structures that exist in society were created by people who have very dense egos. You know, they're coming at it from an egoic standpoint. It doesn't mean structure has to be that way, but all structure is a product of the people who create it. And because the majority of structures, religion being, you know, one of the biggest problems in that area, religion was never created to bring a person closer to God. Religion was created as a means for the people in control to control the people, you know, and that's really all it was, to use spirituality as a tool for controlling people. You know, if you want to be closer to God, you've got to come to my church and I'll tell you how to be closer to God. That, you know, those kinds of structures just take people further away from things. The truth is, we all have everything we need within ourselves to find God. We don't need somebody else to show us the way. But I think, though, as we become more conscious, we're going to see more and more structures in society that actually lead us toward higher consciousness. And really, what we're doing with Flower of Life and all of our projects are really an attempt to do that, to try to create an organization, a system by which people are actually self-empowered, versus a lot of the existing systems you just mentioned, which have nothing to do with self-empowerment. They're all about centralizing power with a few people who control these organizations and ideas, and not really empowering each individual to be at their best.
Yes, absolutely. I see, as we talked earlier, the awakening and empowerment of people is bursting at the seams, and it seems like if you take a step back and look, the power structure that once tried to control people is running around putting out fires everywhere, and it seems like they're always a step behind, and I think that's going to change too. So, segueing into the conference you are bringing to Detroit, you and a handful of other very talented people, it's the Awake and Empowered Conference. It's in October. It's coming to the Kobo Center, and what can you tell me about that?
Well, it's really the Expo, Awake and Empowered Expo, is the culmination of all that Flower of Life is really about, but on a much more massive scale.
So this is like the Super Bowl of Flower of Life.
Right. It is our vision realized on a bigger stage, and it is, for years I've researched all these different areas, from consciousness to health to longevity to science and all these things. And so I'm aware of all the breakthroughs taking place in the world, or not all, but a lot of them. And from my vantage point, as consciousness grows in the world, we're going to see physical manifestations of that in every area. We're going to see physical manifestations in science and technology. We're going to see it in health and longevity. We're going to see it in more people becoming aware of their spiritual gifts and abilities. So I see all these, and in my mind, they all fit together in one puzzle of reality that is coming into being. And so the purpose of the conference is, one, to bring these ideas and concepts and real things happening in the world to a broader audience, so that everybody can know about these things that I know about. And the other is to provide them with these tools so that they can implement them into their lives to enhance their quality of life and their happiness, and also to increase their health and longevity. And so we can really usher in this movement toward a new age from all sides, not just the raising of consciousness itself, which is really my personal focus, but also through technology, through science, through health, through everything. I think it all has to be done together. We all have to move together in unison in this direction to get there as quickly as possible.
Yes. Now, tell me about the people you're bringing in that have never spoken or presented before in the U.S. What kind of surprises are we in store for?
There are two Russian scientists who are coming out, and one is Dr. Peter Gaiaev. He's never been to the U.S. And then Gennady Shipov, who has been to the U.S. but only in private audiences, not really in a public forum like we have at our expo. Speaking about Gaiaev, first of all, he has done some research with his area of research is something he calls linguistic wave genetics, and essentially he has proven that our DNA is not just a physical manifestation in our body that we're born with and that we're stuck with for life, but in fact, just like the books by Bruce Lipton that talk about how our environment determines our genetics, he has really proven that scientifically. One of his experiments, he used a laser beam to beam, essentially beam the laser beam through the eggs of a frog into the eggs of a salamander. Actually, I don't know if it's the other way around, but essentially he beamed it from one to the other, capturing the DNA frequency or signature of one and projecting it into the other. And when the eggs hatched of the salamander, they were frogs. And they were able to mate and reproduce in perfectly healthy offspring. And so what he's able to prove there is we can transmit genetic information using something like a laser. He was able to use the same laser in other ways. In an accidental experiment, I believe he was trying to treat a woman for fibromyalgia, and accidentally she had no teeth, or most of her teeth were missing, and her teeth started growing back. He was able to successfully grow organs inside of animals that they were experimenting with. And my conversation with him, I asked him, so does this mean that the human body can perpetually regenerate itself, and will we be able to live forever if this is true? And he said, well, from his scientific vantage point, he believes within 10 years they'll be able to bring products to market that everyone can use. And he said he can't say that it's going to allow people to live forever, but he thinks there's no doubt that within 10 years, if we want to, we can live for 800-900 years in perfect health. So that's one of the areas of dramatic breakthrough, and he's never been here to present on this topic. And really, he's not that even well known, but remarkable work he's doing.
Now, before we get to the next presenter, I want to also mention that explanation there is a peek behind the curtain of the current Western mindset of thinking, because we're still getting fed in America that 90% of your genes are junk genes. They don't do anything. And every once in a while you'll see an article here or there and someone will have a theory, but this person you're saying he's actually experimenting with that and years ahead of that thinking. So what do you expect? I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but what do you expect to come out of this conference when this information is presented from all these speakers, and not just the two keynotes we're talking about right now?
Okay, well, first of all, we have to understand that our reality is based upon what we think about our reality. So the only reason we live in a society now where everybody sits in their car for an hour, goes to work, grabs a Starbucks on the way there, and sits in a cubicle all day long, doing a job that they don't like, and then they go home, is because our society has been structured in such a way, and we've been trained from very young children that this is how our society is. This is what we should do. This is how we should live our life. We should pay our taxes and live in this certain way. And we have to understand that our society has deliberately been structured in this way, and we have been conditioned through the media and through government and through various other means to see it in this way. So at the very foundation of changing anything, you have to change, one, the consciousness of the people, and two, you have to change the beliefs of the people. So the biggest, we're going to be doing consciousness related work at the expo, obviously, but bringing all these presenters, the point is that when people start hearing about an alternate view of reality, that reality becomes more real. Okay, so if we want ideas like what Dr. Shipov is presenting to be real in our world, to where everybody has access to it, where all of us can live for 800-900 years in perfect health, then we first have to start at the level of thought to where everybody accepts this as the reality. Today, cancer is such a big problem in our society because, one, everybody talks about it. It's in TV shows, it's in commercials, it's in pharmaceutical drug commercials that are on all the time. We have cancer societies, we have cancer drives, and we have celebrities supporting cancer movements. If everybody stopped talking about cancer tomorrow, cancer would go away overnight. It exists in our society because we keep talking about it, we keep perpetuating that reality. So the conference is really our attempt at starting to perpetuate a different reality, bringing about new knowledge, new information to create a different world that is going to be much better for people as a whole.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can't wait to see it. Yeah. So let's go over the other keynote speaker that I interrupted you for. You were getting into him.
Yeah, Dr. Shipov is a Russian scientist. He has been here before, but it's been in private forums, not in a public setting like this. He's quite well known in scientific circles. He has been working with Einstein's theories and has carried them forward. So what he's going to be talking about is he's worked for the Russian Space Agency, and he has worked in propulsion systems and produced propulsion systems that don't actually require fuel, at least as we conventionally see fuel, so they don't burn anything. And actually the spacecraft moves in a similar way to essentially the same as UFO spaceships that we are familiar with, and essentially it displaces itself in space. So he has produced working models of this, and his project has since been classified, so he doesn't know what it's been used for. But essentially, he is working on UFO space technology and free energy and technology that allows these ships to run forever without actually requiring any input fuels. So the implications of that are that same technology can be used to produce any kind of free energy technology that can be implemented to cars or homes or anything. So essentially we can run everything without requiring input electricity, from an external source. We don't need to burn gasoline. He has successfully recreated Nikola Tesla's work, has working models of free energy devices. At the expo, his topics of discussion are going to be primarily free energy technology, torsion fields and how they're being used in propulsion systems. He's actually going to be bringing a little device that he made that allows him to move objects with his mind. So telekinesis is one of the things he's going to be demonstrating live, and which should be pretty exciting.
That should be a crowd favorite for the YouTube crowd.
Yeah, that should be very exciting. He's also going to be talking about teleportation, which is something that he's been working on as well. So really, we're talking about like Star Trek kind of things that are now possible today, that he is working on, that really have not been exposed to a mass audience. So, I mean, imagine how much could change in the world if even one of his inventions or ideas was able to hit the market. Yeah. So that's primarily his area of work.
Excellent. I can't wait to see the press that's going to get and the audience it's going to bring. Yeah. Okay, well, tell me about what you're going to do at the expo. It's energy transfer, among other things. And we'll start with that. Talk about the energy transfer.
Well, that's a long story, but I discovered a while back, all my life I've had this unusual ability with energy. I didn't really give it a lot of serious thought until the last year and a half or 2 years, when I started noticing that people around me were becoming happier and happier the longer they would spend time with me, and when they would leave my life for long periods of time, their happiness level would drop dramatically. And so at first I thought maybe it's a coincidence, and then when I met Barb, the woman who can see energy fields, I realized that, well, maybe it's something to do with this energy field that I have. And so I started doing these experiments in groups of people where I wouldn't actually physically touch anyone, but I would sit in a room and I would raise their consciousness level, increase their consciousness level, at the same time taking their negative energy from them. So one of the things that's unusual is that I'll sit in the room and I'll ask people to focus on their negative thoughts and emotions, or or ask their higher consciousness to release their karma to me, and to ask them to direct that toward me in the room. And when Barb is there watching, what she sees is that she sees all this dark energy coming toward me, but it disintegrates as it hits my energy field. And so they no longer have it anymore, and they don't have to deal with it anymore. And it does not affect me adversely. And at the same time, I'm able to send them an energy to raise their consciousness level. And we have actually measured changes in consciousness. And one of the main side effects is that I hear reported is that people are becoming happier and happier, and they're able to cope with stressful circumstances in their life without getting stressed out. They can be around people who normally would throw off their balance and not be affected by it. So those are all signs of raising consciousness. When your consciousness grows, your ego becomes less in control of your experience, and ego is what creates all the suffering in our lives. So that is one of the effects of it. We have seen remarkable changes in health breakthroughs, and so on, because all of it kind of goes together. But I don't really focus on the health so much. My interest is really increasing people's happiness level and allowing them to acclimate to this new energy, this new consciousness that is coming in the world, and adjust to that more easily rather than suffering through the turbulence that we have going on in the world right now. So that's, essentially what takes place. And at the event, I'll explain how it works, and I'll be able to sit in the front of the room and do that for everybody who's in the audience.
Excellent. So you said you're able to measure consciousness. Would there be a way to standardize that and give it to world leaders before they get into office? Perhaps we can weed some of these people out?
Well, unfortunately, first of all, I always tell people you can't change our government by voting, and really voting is futile anyway, because most of it is probably not even legitimate these days. But ultimately, we are all responsible for our leaders, because it's the consciousness of a country or the world as a whole that determines its leaders. Ultimately, as our consciousness as a world grows, our leaders will naturally become higher consciousness individuals, because the leaders must match the consciousness of the country. I understand that a lot of the world leaders right now are trying very hard to cause more suffering for the people. There is whether they're aware of it or not, there is a reason why they're doing that. By causing suffering in the people, they are causing consciousness to stay low. Right. And if consciousness stays low, then people like them can remain in power. We can have more insane people in the world. But if consciousness continues to grow, people like them cannot remain in power. Either they must grow in consciousness, or they will leave and be replaced by higher consciousness individuals. So yes, we can measure right now consciousness of world leaders and decide who should be there. But the bottom line is it wouldn't matter, because until consciousness changes, we wouldn't be able to put those leaders in power. They're not supposed to be. But 20 years from now, we're going to have a much more conscious leadership. And a good many of those people are children. I mean, they're in their 14, 15-year-old. Those children have certain things in their astrology charts that will be triggered in their 20s. And those children will really be part of the revolution that's going to take place in the world in a big way.
Yeah, and I can see that now with the children, because with my parents' generation, there was more people that trusted media. Media was something that looked at as the true voice of the people, and now it's very hard to find a child or an adolescent that watches the media and doesn't laugh or doesn't. It's just accepted that you just don't believe it, and the media has become a paper tiger. But now, just to speak on the energy you're talking about, people's personal energy. People have their aura. That's another name for that, is an aura. And that has been, it's kind of a foreign concept to people in the US or America sometimes, because they haven't dealt with that. But I want to remind the people listening that in Chinese medicine, Qigong, and Tai Chi for that matter, they've dealt with that for 1,000 years, and it's actually common knowledge that you move your energy, you move your aura, you expand, you contract sicknesses, slow the energy down that goes through your body. So this is provable scientific, measurable facts, and I look forward to seeing the effects on that. Okay, well, it's good talking to you. I want to end this with one more quote that I pulled off before I got here, and it's actually from Robert Kennedy in a speech to the Senate. And he says in that speech, a revolution is coming. And this was in the 60s. A revolution which will be peaceful if we are wise enough, compassionate if we care enough, successful if we are fortunate enough, but a revolution which is coming whether we want it or not. We can affect its character, we cannot alter its inevitability.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that the revolution is already underway, and it's not up to luckily for us, it's not up to us on an individual basis to determine its future. If it was, then the world leadership would easily be able to derail it, but it is not up to them. It is a consciousness that is much greater than even our planet alone, that is governing, of which we are a part, but no one single one of us has enough control or power to alter that path. It is from a higher vantage point that consciousness is moving. There is nothing we can do to change it. We are heading into an age of greater and greater enlightenment, and for those listening to this, I think the important thing to do is to be on the right side of that, because if you fight against it, you're going to suffer more. If you just go with the natural tides of the universe and let the awakening happen in you, the transition to this new world will be a lot easier and more pleasant and more uplifting and happy for you.
Absolutely. I'll follow your heart and your intuition. Thanks for spending time.